So what if? Now, that's always a big thing that someone sort of talks about. And one of the things we always hear people talk about and say is, well, what about if I put my content out there? You know, if I create this ecosystem of assets, if I put all this content out there and people steal it, you know, and that's always a challenge. And I suppose there's two ways to look at it. And it's like, well, what if you don't?
This is the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast for entrepreneurs and business owners looking for cool online tools, apps and strategies to make business easy online. My name is Nick Cree and I'm your host. Each episode features a guest expert demystifying the online universe, sharing inspirational ideas and providing tested real-world strategies to help you get the most of what's available online to grow your business today. Don't be a slave to your business, get your business working for you. Subscribe now and get some great content and ideas for you and your business today. Fabulous. All right, well, that brings me to my favorite part of the evening, and that is tonight's topic, and our guest speaker is Matthew Mason. So for those of you who don't know Matthew, in fact, I've only recently met him myself as well too, so I had to do a bit of stalking to find out a bit more about him. But here's our guest speaker tonight. He is the founder of Maven Zeal, and he's an expert in transforming complex knowledge into insightful online programs. So he's been working for about 24 years as a learning design professional. And he really has got a proven track record of helping business coaches, consultants, and all sorts of industry experts to create high-ticket programs, which does extend their reach and their influence. So some of the insights which you'll get to hear tonight, they are practical, they are actionable, and they are strategies that you can implement. And these are ones that should be able to elevate what you're doing now and get you seen online and take you to the next level in business. It could be creating something new for your business, or it could be amplifying what you're already doing. So sit back, grab a pen and paper. That sounds a bit old school, doesn't it? Grab your keyboard and mouse and let's come and grab some notes. I know you want to, and let's welcome to the stage Matthew Mason.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks for that introduction. And I'm hoping that you're able to see my screen. That's all showing all good there.
All
good.
Looking good.
Ethan, thumbs up. Thanks, Christian. Okay, so welcome everyone. I want to talk today about how to create an ecosystem of digital assets with the power of content repurposing. And I suppose the why. I mean, if we think about the world that we're living in now and thinking about the challenges that we face, things like technology is changing. I mean, we've just got to look at, you know, when was it, November last year, and this thing called ChatGPT appeared and everyone's gone, oh God, AI. And I mean, AI was around before then, but it certainly popped up. And so the technology is changing. COVID had a huge impact on how we interact, and interactions are changing. And also the barriers are changing. You know, no longer are we, you know, isolated to, you know, the same location. And, you know, we're all here today from, you know, different places, and but in a virtual environment. And so those barriers are changing, and that really has a big impact on a number of things that we do. And I suppose the big question is, well, you know, what does this mean? What does this mean to you? And how does that impact on what you're doing in your business? I think one of the big things that we're seeing is this idea that we're moving very much towards this knowledge economy. And a quote that I love is, you know, the knowledge in your head is invaluable, but intangible. And so often we come across these experts that have a huge amount of value, have a huge amount of knowledge, but it is stuck in their head, and it is invaluable, but it is intangible, because they just, you know, the only way they can get it out of their head is by talking it and having those conversations. But that really impacts on their ability to scale and their ability to reach more people and have an impact on a lot more people. So it's, you know, as we move into this knowledge economy, we need to look at, well, how do we do it? How can we scale? How can we get that knowledge out of our head so that it is valuable and tangible? The other thing as well is that we're also in very much that trust economy, you know, and for people to be able to want to work with you, they need to know, like, and trust you. And Google did some research a number of years ago and came up with the concept of the 7-11-4, which basically talks about we actually need to have, or people need to consume 7 hours of content over 11 different touch points over 4 different locations. So this idea that, okay, I'm going to be on Facebook, or I'm just on Blue Sky, or I've just got my website, or whatever that might be, doesn't really fit into this thing. And for people to know, like, and trust you, they need to consume a range of content. And so you need to think about this mix of digital assets that you're going to have that people can consume, and consume 7 hours of content and 11 touch points, 4 different locations. And also we need to think about this need to scale. If we think about the idea of scaling, we can talk about scaling our time. I'm sure everyone here probably would love to have a little bit more time. I know I certainly would. And what I see so often when we're talking to coaches, experts, business owners, the one challenge is they don't have enough time. And when they're working, and maybe you're delivering a service, or even if you're delivering a product, if you can actually scale your time by creating assets that maybe you don't need to explain everything all the time, maybe you don't necessarily need to be there delivering that information, and you can scale your time. And also then gives you the ability to scale your reach, because if you're not the sole source of the information that's going out there, then you can scale your reach and reach more people, and those barriers of geography that are no longer there can change quite a lot of things. And so no longer you're isolated to Gold Coast, Brisbane, Queensland, wherever. You can go, across Australia, across the world, and scale your reach. But also gives you the opportunity to actually be able to scale your effort as well. Because if you're, have more time, and it might be, maybe you don't want to scale your effort, maybe you're just happy with what you're doing and having more time so you can go and, sit on the beach or do the things you love with friends and family. But it could also be you can scale your efforts because you have more time and you've got more reach. And so there's this real need to scale as part of that process. And so that's where, as part of that, then we need to really think about, well, how do we do that? And the way that we need to do that is by actually creating this ecosystem of digital assets. And that's going to give us that opportunity to scale both time, reach, and our effort. So I want to talk to you a bit about, I suppose, to start off with, is a bit of an action plan on how we can do that. And one of the concepts that I talk about as part of this action plan, when we're talking about this ecosystem of assets, is this idea of a digital twin. So if you think about this idea that your content now, that can be your digital twin, is basically content that allows people to access your information, to learn about you, your products, your services, to actually even, consume some of your services anytime, anywhere, and at any time at a highly affordable price point as well, because it goes digital and you've got these digital assets. And so this whole idea of having this digital twin that allows you to then reach more people and because you've got your digital twin doing the work, it allows you to scale your time, scale your reach, and obviously scale your effort as well. And so to do that, as I said, we need to think about this whole idea of doing what I talk about as an ecosystem of assets. Now, this is what I refer to as my ecosystem. And you might look at this and go, okay, this looks very, very much like a marketing funnel. In a way it is, because when we're talking about creating these ecosystem of assets, we want to, obviously, first of all, we want to generate interest with people. We then want to provide some information. We then want to help them to implement and get those skills and knowledge. And then finally moving on to actually integrating as part of that process. So what I'd like you to do right now is just take a minute, grab a pen and paper, possibly a blank pen and paper, and just get you to draw this funnel. Doesn't have to be a work of art, but basically just draw a funnel with the 4 bars: interest, information, implementation, integration, in the middle of the page. And I'd love you to just draw that. And what we see generally is that the interest in information stuff is very much that informational pieces of content that we're providing. The implementation and integration is very much that transformational. So we can talk about that. So to start off with, let's talk about the first element on that in the ecosystem, and that is the interest level. And so this is where we're creating these digital assets that are what we call interest products. So they're very much free, highly leveraged. They're highly leveraged because they don't require your time. It's your digital twin using them and delivering them all of the time. And often they're quite automated. So some examples of that could be your articles, social media posts, an email, a video that someone accesses. Could be a scorecard that people go and do and find out that where they've got problems or challenges. It could be infographics. So a whole range of different things there. And what I'd invite you right now is just to have a look in that diagram. So you've got your funnel in the middle of the ecosystem. On the left-hand side, I'd like you to write above up the top there, what do I have now? And on the other side, write down, what could I have? And what I'd like you to do, just take a few minutes just to think about what are the interest products that you have at the moment. But then also think about what are those interest products that you could actually create as you build out your ecosystem in a bigger format. I'll just give you a minute to think about that as part of that process. And as we're going through, if anyone's got any questions, just drop them in the chat as we're going through, and we'll jump onto them a little bit later on. Probably not going to be monitoring the chat straight while we're going through. Okay, so we've got those interest products. But then the next step from that is then we want to go into our information products. And so this is where we start to now providing some information to these potential, they could be our clients by this stage. They could be, potential clients. They could be someone who's interested in our products or services. And what we're looking here is, again, we're looking at things that could be free, or they could be relatively low cost. Again, highly leveraged. So they're not taking our time. We're using the digital assets, using our digital twin to be able to leverage them. And again, they're quite highly automated in that space. So again, we're thinking things like, again, could be videos, could be a book that you've written. And one of the giveaways that we're going to have tonight is a copy of my book, that for anyone that hangs around towards the end as part of the Lucky Door Prize. Could be a webinar or a masterclass, mini course, could be white papers, reports. So there's a whole range of different things you could write there. And again, just invite you to write down on your bit of paper, what do you have at the moment in that are those information products, and what are the things that you could do? What are some of the information products that you could add to build out your ecosystem of assets? And then if we move on, then we get into our implementation products. And these are the things that people really want. This is where we're actually, we're no longer just giving information. We're actually now helping people to solve a real problem and actually implementing the actions they need to do. So if you think about you're a marketing coach, for example, you can give them information around, tools and technology, like Nick does. And, that's some great information, and it could be an interest product, it could be an information product and things like that. But then at some stage they're going, yep, that's all great, but I actually need help to put this into action. Can you help me? And then you've got your implementation product sitting there that can help people with that process. And generally these are a higher cost. They're less leverage because they probably actually start to require your involvement. No longer are we just relying on the digital twin to deliver that information, but we actually need to turn up and need to be able to answer some questions and solve some of the problems that the individual or the group might be having as part of that process. And so it could be a combination of automated and personal. So people might still be coming in and consuming information through those implementation products. They could still be consuming digital content, but you're also turning up as well. So a great example of this would be like an online course where people go in and they're consuming the online course, but then you've got live calls, or it could be a coaching program. where people are doing stuff and they're consuming digital content as part of your ecosystem, but you're still turning up and going, okay, what are your problems? You've been through that training. What did you do? How did it work? What happened? What else do we need to fix? Let's have a look at it as part of that. Workshops, challenges, accelerators, all different names you can use in that space. But it's very much around doing that implementation and actually getting those results that we all probably want to get for our clients. And again, just invite you to just have a think about, well, what would that look like? What does that look like? What do you have at the moment in those implementation products? And what could you have in your ecosystem? And then finally, we can move on to our integration products. And these is very much a premium product that we're offering. So there's not a great deal of leverage. A lot of it is probably coming from you. It's very personal. And generally, we're looking at these things like one-to-one coaching. Could be accountability groups that you run. So you might do, you could offer one-to-one coaching for people, or it could be after people have been through a program or done the service and they go, okay, well, I still need some help with that. It could be done for you services. It could be the point where you're kind of, great, this is how you do all of this stuff, and you've taken them through that information. You've delivered that information product. You've delivered the implementation. But at the end of the day, they've gone, okay, I know how to do this, but I don't want to do it. And I actually want someone else to do it for me. Or it could be, with products and things like that, where you actually have a product and you've provided them information on how they can use the product, but maybe they still need other support, and there's other done for you services that could come around in that space. So again, just have a moment to think about what could those digital assets be at that place. And generally, as we're saying, it's very much that premium product as part of that. So what is it you have at the moment in those integration products, and what do you have in the implementation products? Or what could you have, I should say, in the integration products? And often what we see is this is one that people quite often miss. They go, okay, I'm going to run a coaching program, or I'm going to have my core service, but they don't have that thing afterwards, which really emphasizes and builds on that huge transformation as part of that process. So we can think about, so I'd be interested just to drop in the chat there. How many people have got something in every element in there, if they were to look at what they have in that ecosystem? If someone has got something in every level of that ecosystem, drop it in the chat, or if you don't, just drop a no in the chat. Just be interested to see how people have as part of that. Okay. So Nick's saying yes, but he could build out more. Yep, definitely. I'm sure we could always build out a lot more as part of that. Okay. Great. So we've got some yeses, which is great. And that's the thing. But obviously just keep thinking about what can we do? Because the whole idea of the ecosystem of asset is we actually gives us that opportunity to attract more people, to offer people in a range of different ways as the way we access things. And so that's one element we can think about. But then obviously we need to think about, well, how do we do this? How can we actually build out that ecosystem of assets as part of that whole process? So one of the things that I like to think about is this whole idea of content repurposing. And if we think about the whole idea of the content repurposing, is really focusing on a piece of pillar content. And then from that pillar content, we can then extract from that a number of different assets. And so there's a couple of different ways that we do this, and a couple of different ways that you can do that as well. So one of the ways that we do that is we actually create a number of visual models. 4 powerful visual models that talk about the results that people can get, the keys, the answers, the key things they need to have in place, the process to get those results, and the benefits of getting those results. And what we find is when we actually put those visual models into the ecosystem, it allows us to then spit out a whole lot of things, because we can actually go, great, we've got, for example, in our situation, we've got our visual models, And one of those visual models is our answers model, which talks about the 6 key things that we think people need to be able to leverage their expertise. And one of the things we've got in there is we've got some ebooks. We've also got a scorecard that people can go in and can rate themselves against the number of questions that are aligned against each of those pillars in that answers model, and tells them how they score, and have they scored well or have they not scored well. And that gives us an indication on where people are at, but also gives them an indication on where they're at and what things they need to work on. It could be brochures, videos, articles, white papers. Okay. We then think about the information. We've got our process model, for example, which talks about these are the steps we're going to take people through from problem to prize. And from that, you can go, okay, well, this is the process you need to follow. And you could do a webinar, could be a mini course, could write a book, or a book could actually be written around all of the models. Implementation could be a course, program, workshop. You've done for your services, accountability groups, one-to-one programs. So that's why you can actually take that key piece of that key pillar, which is your visual models, which talks about who you are and what you do and what you offer. And you can package that up into that. And that gives you a whole range of different targets to build into that ecosystem. And so that's one of the ways that we can actually really access that and really create that ecosystem of things. But also it allows us to, and probably more focused on just getting content out there in terms of the, social media content, things like that. We can actually create a whole lot of different content there as well. So for example, if we look at a process model, our process model is 6 steps. And so we can actually create an asset around each of those 6 steps. And then we've got generally 3 main points under each of those steps. And so if I do some quick maths, what's that, 18? So it's 25 different pieces of content that have already come about from that one pillar of using process model. And so we can actually now start to see how we actually can create this whole range of different assets that come out of that. Now I can actually go and create all of those and split them up and create this huge range of different assets that we can create. But we can also do it for social media as well. And if we think about using the video as a key piece of pillar content, then we can actually look at doing that and going, okay, right, well, we've got a video and we can actually split that video up into a number of other smaller video bites. And now I'm sure, Nick, you've probably got a whole range of tools and technology that you've mentioned around, using to split up tools. One of the ones that we use quite often is a tool called Content Fries. And that allows you to take a larger video and actually break it up into much smaller pieces of video. So it could be that, yes, you record yourself and doing it might be a video and you've spoken for 10, 15, 20 minutes, what it might have been. Could have been, a webinar that you've run, something along that line. And you can actually then drop it into a tool like Content Fries, or there's a whole range of different ones out there now, and actually split that up into a whole range of different, different bites of information as part of that process. But you can also then take that video and look, and when I say you can take that, I mean, you physically could do it, or you could pay a VA to do it, or go on Fiverr or do things. So there's a whole range of different ways that this can happen. You can also take that video and turn it into an audio. And so the event effectively then you could have a podcast type style resource that people can consume in a range of different ways. You can also take that podcast or that audio or even just the video and get it transcribed, and that becomes a blog. Or you can take it into and put it into, and then becomes an email. And there might be some wonderful things you've said in that video that could also then come out and do in a quote card. And so there's a whole range of different ways. And so as a result, we can actually see now that we're actually starting to repurpose a very simple piece of content, and we're actually creating an ecosystem of assets. And these are very much around that information type assets that we can reach. But it doesn't have to be a video. I mean, Nick's just shown us a great tool, what was it, AI Quantify. So we can actually grab that, we can actually reverse this a little bit, and we can actually go, hey, cool, AI Quantify, create me a blog article. You could use your blog article as a pillar content. You can then take that blog article and you can actually record yourself talking about it, and that could actually become then your video. And then you could split that video up into video bites, then your audio. So there's a couple of different ways that you can actually approach this piece to actually create that repurposing and things around for social media. So what if? Now, that's always a big thing that someone sort of talks about. And one of the things we always hear people talk about and say is, well, what about if I put my content out there? You know, if I create this ecosystem of assets, if I put all this content out there and people steal it, you know, and that's always a challenge. And I suppose there's two ways to look at it. And it's like, well, what if you don't? What if you don't put your content out there? You know, and people can't steal it because you haven't put it out there. But then people can't consume it if it's not out there. People can't get to know who you are, and people can't access it and can't get to know who you are and can't get to know, like, and trust you if you don't put it out there. And so that's a big sort of challenge as well when we do that. But also, I suppose there's probably a lot of other what ifs. So I'd invite people now just to in the chat there, or if you feel like, you know, coming off mute, probably easier, probably do it in the chat, or put your hand up if you want. What other things, if you think about, well, what if I did this? What if I did that? What are some other what ifs that you might have when you're thinking about creating this ecosystem of assets? What if no one is interested? Yep, that's a good one. Okay. And that's the thing. Look, what if no one's interested? Well, yeah, yeah, it's always an issue. Like, what if no one's interested? Well, challenge is that probably someone is going to be interested, and you probably just need to look at that and you know, put it out there and just test it and see what happens, and just trust that someone will be interested. You know, what if it's too technical, pitched wrong? Yeah, look, that's certainly one of the things. I see things being too technical and pitched wrong. Quite often it's the curse of the expert, where we go out there and we assume people have got a certain amount of knowledge. And, you know, I've come across this many times where, you know, talking about learning design and talking to people and thinking, oh, well, you're in the role, you should know this, and they don't know it, and things like that. So, yeah. Yeah, so I think, look, with that, you know, to try and overcome that technical pitch wrong is just, again, put it out there, test it, or give it to someone who's not an expert. You know, and that's one of the things I find, you know, in my area, because I come into a lot of different industries, and I'm not an expert, and it gives me that opportunity to look at things. So I think, yeah, if you're going, okay, well, what if it's pitched wrong or too technical? Yeah, get someone who doesn't know anything about it, throw it to them, get them to watch the video, the blog, go through the course, whatever the asset is in the ecosystem, and go, how do I do this? How does this make sense to you? Does this resonate with you as part of that process? Yeah. Okay. What if I spend all this time and it doesn't make money? Yeah. Look, that's always a big challenge as well. And again, it's a case of, well, you know, you can spend the time and you're probably still not going to, you know, you can not spend the time and you're probably still not going to make the money as well. So it is part of that process. So, yeah. And look, what if someone else is doing the same thing? Yeah, look, and I think that's part of that doing the same thing, I think, comes back to, I suppose, one of the things we talk about when we actually talk about creating this ecosystem and creating the visual models. And I find the visual models gives you that opportunity to actually create your own little secret sauce. Because if we want to stand out in the market, we've either got to be, you know, doing something that's completely different, or we have to have a new and different way of doing things. So I think if you actually think about your secret sauce and putting that up, then that gives you an opportunity that someone else might be doing the same thing. But if you've packaged it in the right way, and you've, you know, put it through, and you've created a model, you've got a framework, you've got a methodology that makes you look a little bit different, and also allows you to stand out a bit more as an expert, then you're going to attract people's attention in that way, and you probably don't necessarily have to worry about someone else who's doing the same thing that doesn't necessarily have their own model or framework as part of that waste. Okay. What if you don't like being a nuisance? You know, so yeah, and I suppose, yeah, some people get overwhelmed with information. Yeah, and I think as well, like, being overwhelmed with information is great, but if you actually take some of that content, and especially if you're thinking about that information and interest, you know, or interest in information products, if you package it up and take that key content and break it away and go, okay, blog articles, videos, podcasts, it gives you a range of different ways for people to consume that information. So some people, yes, they might get a little bit overwhelmed with information, but if you break it down into very small chunks and provide it in a number of different ways for people to consume, then certainly can overcome that way. What if you don't like being a nuisance? Yeah, well, I mean, look, I don't know about that one. I don't necessarily see it as being a nuisance because, I mean, I suppose if you're directly emailing it to people and tagging people and things like that and annoying them, then yeah, I think you probably wouldn't want to be a nuisance. But certainly just putting your content out there or creating a course, giving people an opportunity to consume your content, to find you, well, you're not being a nuisance in that space. So there's a whole range of things there. And what if you don't know enough and other experts criticize? Yeah, look, I mean, if you've been around and you've been doing something and you've got a couple of years experience behind you and you know some stuff, and if you've been able to take that stuff and create some sort of, as I said, a secret sauce or a framework, then you just got to be confident that's what you're doing, and don't worry about those trying to knock you down and the tall poppy and things like that. And but I love Jeff's one. What if it worked? Well, that's a great one. And like, what if? Yeah, what if this does work and takes off? Well, it means that you're going to be in a position where it's going to be a difficult position because you're going to have to go, well, hey, do I actually need to, what do I do? Do I take on all of this work? Do I actually start turning work away? I've got all the, all this extra income coming in, but I've got people consuming all of my assets. And if you do it in the right way, as I said, create that ecosystem of assets, thinking about your digital twin, and thinking about this whole idea that, at the moment, probably 100% of what you're doing is giving information and potentially providing implementation. But if you actually create that digital twin that can take a lot of that away and you can scale, then yeah, it's going to be good if it really works for you. So, yeah. So that's sort of most of what I wanted to cover off when we're talking about that ecosystem of assets. I hope you've got some ideas around what you can do, what your ecosystem could look like, and to start thinking about what could that pillar content be, videos, or whether it's something bigger, part of your program that you can then split out and create a whole range of different things. But you'd love to open it up now to questions and see if we've got any questions coming through.
All right, if there's any questions there, feel free to drop it in chat or unmute, and we can come into the room as well.
Yep, Peter.
Matt,
yep.
What in your mind would be the very best format to repurpose content? What's the most successful one in your experience?
Yeah, look, that's an interesting one. Look, I certainly see video. Video is quite popular. A lot of people like consuming video, but also then if you're doing video that would potentially have subtitles as well, because some people quite often like to consume a video and stuff, but maybe they're on a bus or something, and they want to be able to read along with it as well. But saying that though, that what I often find is if a video is actually taking people through and going, okay, you need to do step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, then generally I find that while the video could be quite good, something more text-based for that would actually work a lot better. Because if you're going, okay, well, you do step 1, you do step 2, you do step 3, and someone's still trying to work out step 1 of doing whatever it is that they're doing, and you've moved on to step 2 or 3. And quite often then you've got to go through and you sort of, need to pause the video in that space. But generally I think that, yeah, you need to potentially look at a mix of different medium and thinking about different ways that you can do it. Because again, video is not always the best way. Like I wouldn't want to be having an operation where a doctor was just taught via video. You know, so think about what is actually the outcome, the end outcome you want people to do. If they're actually something very practical, we'll look at how you can actually do that practical thing with them as part of that.
Okay, Matt, the reason I ask is because it depends also on where the people are consuming the repurposed content.
Yes.
That's a big factor as well, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, and also it also depends on your audience as well. You know, where the people are, definitely, because yeah, if they're consuming content, you're not going to put you know, a lot of stuff you see on Twitter or X or whatever it is. It's, you know, it's obviously very short content. You can't put a lot of long form content on there. Different platforms, yeah, people don't want to necessarily sit there and scroll through different things. But also, as I said, it does depend on your audience and really understanding your audience. You know, I've looked at some you know, medical research papers for a project I was doing once, and looking at medical research papers, and they just put me to sleep. They were long, text-based, heavy, and boring. But yet the people that I was working with loved them, and they would sit there and they'd consume them all the time. And I'm like, this is terrible content. But yet for them, it wasn't. So I think that's all the other part as well, is really thinking about who's your audience and what is it that they like? How do they like to consume content? And where do they hang out? And where can you provide them the content that they want?
Well, one of the things I'm interested in, Matthew, is that visual model of yours. You know, where you're, you know, top of funnel, so to speak, is a lot of that free content. In terms of moving people sort of through to the content, and you know, how you get people then to start paying you for what you're doing at those stages in content. Have you got some sort of formula or some comment around that?
Yeah, look, I think it's really just about inviting them to the next steps. And so what we're generally doing is we're doing it in a couple of different ways. So for example, we find our scorecard works really well on our website. I probably should have provided a link to it, but on our website, mavenzeal.global, you can go through and do our scorecard. And as part of that scorecard, they get a report at the end of it. And then that gives us an opportunity to then go, okay, well, this is where people are. And we can then reach out to them and invite them to come along to a call, and we can have a chat with them. But also gives us an opportunity to put them into an email sequence where we can keep nurturing them with a little bit more information, and then inviting them on if they might want to come and do one of our courses or other things along that way. So I think, yeah, it's very much about, yeah, sort of doing that invite thing and trying a few different things as well. Like we've got some stuff running at the moment, and we're doing an ad straight direct to a call, and we're getting people signing up for that. But then we're also getting people that are consuming the content in the ad that aren't signing up, but they're probably more likely to go and do our scorecard or go and do something else. But it's really about how can you just keep providing them with information and try and build that conversation in that space. And that's, you know, a number of different ways you can do that. And if you've got that, yeah, as I said, got that ecosystem of assets, or you've repurposed content in a number of different ways, then you can actually do that. And it might be that, yeah, people, you know, have an opportunity, especially if we think about that 7-11-4, you know, it might be that someone hasn't necessarily 7-11-4'd you yet, and just continue to provide that information to them in those different ways. So, yeah. Great. So must-have platforms to get exposure, and how often? Yeah, look, again, for me, LinkedIn is probably one of the big ones, but that's where my audience is. So I think it really is about really, you know, getting out there and working out who your audience is and where they hang out. You know, I couldn't say that there is a single, you know, platform, because, you know, it might be, hey, you can go and start promoting everything on Instagram, but if your audience isn't on Instagram, well, you're just, you know, just sort of wasting your time. So I think that's it. But and how often? I think just needs to be regular, you know, at least weekly, getting some sort of content out there. But the trick thing is as well, if you look at, you know, we just do some quick maths. I mean, if I take my process model I talked about with the 6 steps, and then talk about those 3 elements underneath that, then there's 25 effectively pieces of content that I could be talking about. Now, if I then repurpose those, or did them all as a video, or some sort of visual format, but then repurpose that into audio podcast, then I can actually, in 3 different ways, then I actually got 75 pieces of content just talking about that one pillar piece of content. And so that allows you to really then, be quite consistent about the process, and being at least weekly, probably multiple times a week. But if you've got 75 pieces of content just for one pillar, and you do that with a couple of different pieces of pillar content, then yes, you can actually reach people, and you can just have it consistently running through. And look, Nick's probably got a whole range of different tools that you can use, to actually just put content and just have it, daily or weekly or however often you want, just continually feed it out there into social media channels. Jeff, you got your hand up.
Yeah, just can you hear me, Matthew? I'm not sure
you're fine.
You've got a new mic. I'm not sure it's working.
No,
I'm shocked, surprised, whatever. I speak to a lot of people every day because we're quite aggressive on social media, and it's amazing the amount of people who are on LinkedIn who actually knock Facebook and say, "Oh, Facebook's useless, rah rah rah. I'm never going to do Facebook," and yet 70% of my income comes from Facebook. So I've got people on Facebook who tell me, "Oh, that LinkedIn, it's all bullshit. It's not for me, rah rah rah." And the people are just missing the point. You've got to find out what the 4 must-have platforms are, and beyond them as often as you possibly can.
Definitely.
I think once a week, sort of like, I'll forget about you. And the other thing you can do, guys, that's very important. Whatever you put up last month, I mean, we've all got short-term memory loss. You can virtually put it up again, and you get a whole new audience with the same stuff.
Well, yeah, that's right. And I think it ties into Paul's comment there about how do you overcome the fact that, as Nick mentioned, LinkedIn is only going 2% of your connections. You can keep posting the same content. You wouldn't post it each day, but you can, once you actually build up a library of content, and then you've got your ecosystem, well, you can repurpose it and roll it out every 3 months or every 6 months. Because the challenges are that not all of your connections is going to see it. And so, you can put it out there, and you might attract new people, or you might have had new connections on LinkedIn by then, or more new friends on Facebook and things like that. But often what I see is the people who are telling you that Facebook's dead and you need to use LinkedIn have probably got a product that's teaching you how to use LinkedIn. We see the same thing from a learning design perspective. I see all these people who are saying, the only way to build it to promote your courses is through a challenge. And guess what? Hey, they've got a product to teach you how to run a challenge. I've got other people that will tell you that the only way you can do it is through a webinar. And guess what? Oh, they're going to teach you how to do a webinar. So, Paul. No, it's all good. Thanks. Paul, you got a question?
Yeah, hi. Thanks, Matthew. Paul Kennedy here. Just going back to my question about overcoming the fact that most posts only go to around 2%. So in other words, 98% are not getting to see. You've come up with 1 or 2 suggestions, but can you give us some more? Because to be honest, 98% is one hell of a lot to miss out on. And I'm wondering, if you do a post and you put it out there generically to all your connections, do you also think it's worthwhile going in and earmarking specific connections and sending it to them personally as a specific message?
Look, it could be valuable, but I think, you just need to make sure that you're not becoming that nuisance when you do that. Some of the other things that we're seeing that works quite well, and it's really about playing with the algorithms. When you're putting content out there, and there's a number of content parties. There's a guy on the Gold Coast, and he has a platform called Content Ninja Party. And basically what that is a group of people coming together, and they're all posting content at the same time, and everyone else is part of that party, is actually then going and commenting, liking and sharing, or not sharing so much, but liking and commenting on the post. And effectively what that does is LinkedIn's algorithm, and unless they've changed it, but it was set to be, well, if your post gets a lot of likes in the first hour or two and lots of comment, well, we're then going to obviously deem it to be valuable content, and we're then going to share it to more people. Whereas if you put a post out there and it doesn't necessarily get that content, so that's another one you can look at, is look at, okay, is there those sort of content parties out there where you would have people in a like group that could post and would then like and comment on your posts, which is then going to highlight to LinkedIn that this is a wonderful piece of content. And what we saw when we were using it, we were seeing posts that were, we were getting probably 10, in some cases 10 times as many as much reach just through that content, because more people commenting on it, LinkedIn algorithm was showing it to more people.
I am aware of that particular one. I must admit I wouldn't use it myself. I just think it's manipulative and somewhat contrived, to be honest. And I just think there have got to be better ways, and that's not one I would want to use myself. So,
yeah, look, I
think it's a system where you, as you say, you're in a group. I like what you like what I like, and you pay a fee. And I just think we're better than that. So I'd love to hear any more suggestions you have to overcome this, because I think the algorithm's almost got us beat, and we need better solutions.
And that's the challenge, And it's just a matter of just getting the content out there and just putting regular content out there as part of that process. I honestly, I'm still trying to beat the algorithm myself, and don't have too many other examples. But I think it's really just about lots of content, testing it, seeing what works, and just trying to get those the likes and things as early as possible. So, Jeff, you've got your hand up again.
I have. We also have a lot of luck. People don't realise it, but you can put up a wonderful story. You might take an article out and think, oh, it's fantastic, I'll really kill it with this one, and you might get one like or no likes, right? But post that same thing up. Use your mobile phone where you can put music and all sorts of things, and post it up on stories. And it's our experience, we'll get 20 to 25 people click on it, and 4 or 5 making a comment. And then we've got a software, in our case, we've got a software that we do nothing. The software actually reaches out and says something like, gee, thanks for liking our post regarding ... Would you like to jump on a call and talk more about that subject?
Yep.
That gets us a lot of action and traction. So Facebook stories are very, very powerful.
Yeah, no, that's great. Right. Yeah, and that's the thing. It's a matter of just testing and obviously, as I said, finding your channel as part of that process. So,
There's just another comment in the chat there, Matthew, from Gareth, just asking about your views on AI and or protecting your digital assets and intellectual property. Sorry.
Yep. Yeah. So look, so I'm just saying the perspective on protecting digital assets. Yeah. So okay. So in terms of, I think that if we're thinking about protecting it, I've got to think about the right terminology here. If you actually have your IP packaged up as a product as such, so if you talk about a framework, a methodology, something like that, that is something that could be trademarked, and that allows you to protect it. The general concept, though, that's going to be the challenge. And look, one of the things that we do with a lot of, in one of our programs that we're just launching is we're actually doing a program launching to for coaches, consultants who have a solution that solves a problem for employees of large companies, is actually saying, hey, we'll actually package up your program and sell it to large companies, because they're really not that interested in stealing your IP. They're more interested in making profits and things like that. But yeah, I think the thing is, if you actually can package up that IP into a framework or into a methodology that you can trademark, then that gives you a little bit more security around that. But look, unfortunately, people are still going to steal, and that's, I don't know if there's any way you can get around that sometimes. And again, if it's a bit of a challenge in that space.
I
suppose the other.
If I might add to that, Matthew, and wonderful talk, by the way, because I think what you've identified, and it's true for all of us business owners, is that our businesses have multiple digital assets, and that can be a valuable part of any business. And the IP goes beyond, you know, I think trademarks. That, you know, the fact you can build an education program is intellectual property you can sell, and I guess that's more my point. And I think, you've illustrated how if we create all these things, they're actually assets of our business which can be sold.
Yeah, definitely, and that's why I refer to them as assets, because they actually have value. You know, and it might be that, you know, an ebook or a social media post might not have a huge amount of value, but if it attracts a lead who actually ends up becoming a client, well, then there's quite a lot of value in it there inside of that process. So yeah.
Great talk, thank you.
Oh, great. And sorry, Gareth, you also had a comment in there about the value of AI economy and things like that. And look, AI is a really interesting one as well. I mean, and look, Nick's shown us a great AI tool that you can use as well. But again, I think that AI can come into it two parts. There's one of the things I see is this generative AI. You know, saw some stuff, and I was talking to a colleague the other day, and he actually had someone that said, "Oh, look at this course I've just created with this AI tool," and it was rubbish. You know, and he's just like, "Oh no, it's just rubbish." And I think that we can use AI to give us ideas and generate content, and certainly the generative AI can work really well. And if you've got a good tool, then use it. But I think what is more powerful that we really should be focusing on is looking at how we can actually use AI as our digital twin, and looking at, okay, if I've got a chat bot or some sort of AI tool that I can feed it with my information, I can feed it all my digital assets, and it can actually then sit on the website. We've got one on our website. We've fed it a lot of information, and people can actually go on there and actually ask it questions, and it will actually respond based on that. And I think so that's a bit going beyond the generative AI that people are so often using with, you know, ChatGPT and all the others, but actually going into that space of going, okay, I'm going to use AI as a tool to be my digital twin is certainly a big thing I'd be looking at, and certainly we're quite keen on how we can do that more with what we're doing with our own stuff and with our clients as well. Christian, you've got your hand up as well.
Yeah, just a comment about trademarks. Yeah, I've got a couple of my programs courses that are trademarked, or titles for them, and I think having trademarks can also lend a bit of credibility, additional credibility to your assets. And in the discussion about AI, I think it's really important not to lose sight of our own authenticity in both the content of the product and how we present that. And the danger with AI is that we just go for volume and get it to do everything, whereas we need to go for quality and authenticity, I think.
Definitely. Yeah. Look, you can use generative AI as a great tool if it's speaking in your tone and giving out that information in your language, but it's still not going to tell the stories. It's still not going to give, tell your experiences that you've got. You need to bring that in. And we're going to see that happening over time. We're going to see people that are just using it, just rolling out and just using it to roll out courses, content, whatever, without even any sort of critical thinking about it to, and the people that are putting in their personal touch, providing the stories, their own experiences are going to make much more impact through people they're working with. Yeah. As I said, we've got a program working on, which is our Expert Ecosystem Engine program. I think Nick, thanks. There's a link that I've just dropped in there. So if anyone's interested, it's due to launch 1st of October. But yeah, you can sign up and register your interest, and we can be in touch if you're interested there. But I think, look, we're sort of getting on towards a bit of time, so I'd just like to say thank you very much for Nick, for inviting me along to having the talk, and thank you everyone for all of your involvement and interaction. It's been great.
Fantastic. Excellent. Thank you very much for that. That was certainly some insightful stuff in there. And I think for me, my biggest takeaway, in fact, was your structure. for the content and creating it. So that sort of framework and that structure, I guess, sort of simplifies the whole process of creating that content, for whatever it is you're doing in business. So appreciate that. If people do want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to get in touch with you?
Yeah, I suppose they can jump on. I probably should. They can email me. I've just dropped it in the chat there, or you can reach out to me. I'm on LinkedIn through LinkedIn as part of that. But yeah, probably easiest way is just shoot me an email, and look, we can have a chat as part of that process.
Fabulous, excellent.
Yeah,
perfect. All right, well, we're sort of at the time of the evening. There is a door prize for tonight, and you hinted at what that was. So do you want to tell us a bit more about what the door prize is?
Yeah, so it's basically a copy of my book that I wrote, Leverage Your Expertise, How to Scale Up, Create Impact, and Live the Lifestyle You Desire. So this is a book I wrote a while ago, and it's actually a book that I wrote after creating my own visual models, and the book is basically, just I've taken the visual models and then just created them, and then just started talking about them. Or actually was talking about them. I actually just used a tool called otter.ai. At the time, I had an office away from home. This is before COVID, and I used to just drive to the office every day, and I had all of the key points I wanted to talk about on index cards, and I'd stick one to the dash of the card, turn on Otter, and as I'm driving, I just go blah, 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 and just record the stuff. And then at the end of it, I just had a transcript of my book, of all the different parts of my book, and then just packaged it all up and got it edited, and that's the end result.
Fantastic, excellent. All right, well, we do have a special way of drawing this. You will, and so the lucky winner of this will actually get a physical copy of the book as well. So we'll connect you up with Matthew to organise posting, and I'm sure he'll be happy to sign it as well too. That signature alone is probably going to be worth millions in the future, and certainly information will be worth hopefully millions for you as well. All right, well, let's everyone's in the wheel of names. You need to be in the room to win, so now's not the time to disappear, so stick around, and let's spin the wheel. And there it goes. So virtual drum roll on the table in front of you. So we get our lucky winner. And today, it'll be Paul Kennedy. So one of our contributors with the question there. So you've got a framework there now, Paul. And you're sort of challenging us as well too, because we're having to read your lips.
You're on mute, Paul, if you...
I think there's Paul may be struggling there with the with the unmute button, so we'll just go with the fact that he says thank you, and that he's
there now. But thank you. Yes, I was struggling to find the unmute, but delighted. Thank you, Matthew. I'm really pleased. Look forward to learning.
Not a problem. Well, look, Mike, I've dropped my email into the chat there. So if you just want to email me your address, and I will arrange for that book to be posted out to you.
Excellent. Thanks so much for that. And thanks also, Nick, for what you do. This is just an excellent weekly webinar. And tonight was another example. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Paul. I appreciate that. And I think sort of Matthew and Paul, you have good connections together as well too. So I'm sure there's sort of probably some things that are worthwhile collaborating together on, so, or at least having a conversation as well too.
Good. Thank you. Thank you again.
All right. Well, that is our show tonight. So let's give Matthew a big warm round of applause for the knowledge he's shared tonight. So thank you very much for coming on tonight. If you've enjoyed tonight and there were some things in there that you'd like to watch again, this will be up on the Smash Go YouTube channel by tomorrow afternoon. So if you haven't subscribed to the channel, now's a good time to head over there now and click the subscribe and then the little bell button. The link is in chat as well. And if you know anyone else that might be interested in the topic too, feel free to share that or send them along to the channel as well to catch up with the recordings. And of course, while you're there, all of our previous episodes are all up on the channel as well. And if you're not a member of the Business Owners Smashing It Online Facebook group. Now's a good time to go and join that as well. So again, the link is in chat as well too. If you want to save the chat, now's a good time to save it. If you click on the three little dots, which hopefully is on the top right-hand side of chat for you, or if you've got an older version, it might be down the bottom. If you click that, then you can save the chat to your computer. So of course, all of those links to the online tools are in there, the conversation that we've had, and all of the links through tonight to Matthew as well, including the course that he talked about that is launching as well. They're all in there as well too. All right, well, that leaves us to the session, or leaves us for tonight. We will be back again next week, same time, different topic. So look forward to seeing you all again there. Once again, thanks, Matthew, for coming onto the show, and everyone, thanks for participating and getting some information for tonight, which hopefully is helpful in your business. See you again next week. Thank you for tuning in and listening to the Business Owners Smashing It Online podcast. You can also find me on social media and online. Just search for Business Owners Smashing It Online and Nick Cree, spelled Nickcree, all one word. If you like this and want to hear more, subscribe now. Until next time, don't be a slave to your business. Get your business working for you.